I'll call the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority and Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Authority to order. And this is our regular meeting at 3:30 p.m. I'll call the meeting to order. Would you please take roll?
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley? Here. Commissioner Gitland?
Here.
Chair Ania.
I'm here. Thank you. Next is public comment. Any member of the public can address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. After receiving recognition from the chair, please give your name and address for the record, and comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Is there any public comment on the solid waste agenda for today? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Bill Norte, I live in Crescent City, and as I have done with your predecessor boards.
Is the mic on for him?
I would like to take the opportunity to remind the new board what the other boards knew, and that is that there are some of us out there who really love our trash collection service as it is and would like to see nothing happen to make it change it for the worse. Additionally, I hoped that the editorial in the paper this morning was wrong when it suggested that certain members of your board have closed minds on the issue of whether or not the waste management district is necessary. I know that that's not true. And so I urge you to consider all of the options that will come before you carefully, and to make sure that whatever you do no harm. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time? All right, seeing none, I'll close public comment. Next is item number 1 is a report from the Solid Waste Task Force. I think I saw, there's Wes.
Hi, I'm Wesley Nunn. I was recently elected as the chairperson of the Solid Waste Task Force. I've got some big shoes to fill. Mary Wilson did an excellent job, and we have a wonderful task force, including Mary Wilson as vice chair at this point. So she's still in it. There's not a lot to report right at this point. I checked with Dave Mason a couple of days ago. He said that on our request to have Dave Mason meet with Eric Taylor with the city is still considering whether to approve that or not, so that hasn't gone through yet. Other than that, I don't have much to report this time around, and I think we're going to meet on the 4th of April. I think, is that what we're looking likely for our next meeting? Or?
Either the 4th or the 11th. It's your call.
Okay. I think at this point we'll do it on the 4th.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 2 is the consent agenda, and there's 2 items on the consent agenda. 2.1 is the approved minutes from the regular session of Tuesday, February 26th. And 2.2 is approval of a 5% longevity pay step increase for the director in recognition of 20 years of service on recent satisfactory performance evaluation. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Is there a move for approval? Yes.
I'd like to pull both items off, 2.1 and 2.2 for discussion.
Okay, we can do that. Any other comments right now? Okay. Let's go to 2.1, please, to approve the minutes of the regular session on Tuesday, February 26th. Mr. Gidlin?
Council Rice, you and I had a discussion. I have serious issues about the validity of the last meeting. I asked you to please bring with you today to explain the understanding of when the 10-member board disbanded, that it reverted to the 5-member board, and that existing board was in fact a valid board, since the county had yet to appoint board members. So can you please share that with me after our discussion?
Yes, I have with me both the Third Amendment to the JPA agreement as well as the First Amendment Joint Powers Agreement. So Basically, as I explained to you in our conversation, before the 10-member board was created, there were 5 members duly appointed to the authority board. For me, the legal question, once you have appointed board members, is were those board members ever removed or unappointed? Was there something that took them off the board? The creation of the 10-member board was an amendment. It was a temporary amendment. By its very terms, it was a temporary amendment. What that amendment did was basically supplement the board. We added 5 more members. We actually also took off the public member. But those 4 members, the 2 from the county and 2 from the city, were never removed from the board. According to the agreement, a board member can be removed in the same manner that they are appointed, being the city or the county could expressly remove that individual from the board, or if they are no longer the holder of a city council seat or a board of supervisors seat, which is what happened in the case of Leslie McNamer. She could not hold a seat on the authority board once she lost her seat as a supervisor. So after the new year, when the city appointed 2 new members and an alternate, that took care of the city's side. The county did not appoint any new members. So the question became, what was the status of the current, or as some may consider former county members? I looked at the agreement that existed before the Third Amendment. I looked at the Third Amendment, and I looked at the First Amended Agreement, which is the most recent. And there's nothing in those documents that removes any of the prior to the 10-member board members, essentially. So we were left with, who was it, Martha McClure. Leslie McNamer lost her seat, so she wasn't a board member, but the alternate was Jerry Hemmingson. So it was my opinion that we did have 4 seats on the authority board.
I guess my issue with it more is less, it is legality side of it, but also the protocol. As chair of the Board of Supervisors, I was not contacted about asking who the replacements are going to be or when they're going to be on the agenda. And I know Supervisor Hemmingson, as the alternate, was not contacted. Completely out of protocol to contact one supervisor without contacting the rest of the board. And that's where I have an issue with that. That wasn't the proper protocol, and I think it was completely out of line, basically, at that point. As you can see, that supervisor was not put on this board for this year. So that obviously didn't reflect the wishes of the board.
Well, that, as far as protocol notification, what happened there, I understand what you're saying. That wasn't, I personally can't answer to that because that wasn't I wasn't part of that decision. I was asked for a legal opinion on whether we had a board or not. I was not aware that less than everybody was notified.
Well, I guess we were told by Supervisor McClure that you contacted her about sitting on the board. So if that didn't happen, then I need to know who on staff actually contacted Supervisor McClure without contacting the rest of the board.
I did not contact her. She asked me for confirmation of what Kevin had told her I said about the legality of the board.
Okay.
So, Martha, from what you've said today is that there was nothing illegal about having the meeting last month that we know of.
That's correct.
Okay. So based upon that lack of any kind of illegality, it seems like that we need to move forward to approve the minutes now because I think they accurately reflect what occurred at that meeting. So I would move that the minutes of Tuesday, February 26th be approved.
Is there a second? I'll second the motion. I was not there, but
I do have a question, though, is why
Yes.
we had the abandoned vehicle abatement on this current agenda when it was passed at the last meeting? If the meeting was legal, why is it on today's agenda?
I suggested that it be put on because there was so much concern and debate about the meeting not being legal, and even after explaining my interpretation of what's going on, people say, well, I don't agree with you. Well, how we solve that is we put it back on for ratification, and that's how you'd fix that problem, if that's truly the concern.
And I don't mind revisiting some of those issues. I just think that we need to move forward with the minutes since they do accurately reflect the actions that were taken.
okay. Well, it's been moved and seconded. Would you take the roll, please?
Sure. Commissioner Holly?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
I'll abstain.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Abstain.
And Chair Ania?
Yes. So the minutes are not approved.
That's correct. You need both a vote from the city and the county and 3.
Okay. So the minutes are not approved. All right, we will go on to item 2.2. Mr. Gidlin?
Well, I see that there's, I'll read it, approval of a 5% longevity step increase for the director in recognition of 20 years of service and a recent satisfactory performance evaluation. I congratulate you, Kevin. I'm just, there are a couple of things that are troubling me here. First of all, we're in obviously a dire economic situation. There are members of our county employees who have taken substantial pay cuts, 13%, and I'm uncomfortable with approving a 5% increase for someone in this economy and under those circumstances. So I think it should be put on the table for right now. I can't support that.
Any other comments?
I would agree with Supervisor Gitlin in this. I think, and we've said this before, so this is not new, we seem to be, Solid Waste Authority is supposed to be mirroring county policy. We have not mirrored county policy the last 3 years. County policy is cumulative cuts of 13% as the employees have had to take. I don't agree that we're cherry picking the policies right now, and I don't agree with it.
Any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. A few different, I think at least 3 people have asked me about this. It didn't kind of all come together until today. We have a couple different documents that speak to this situation. One is Kevin's contract. It does not address longevity increases. It doesn't address merit and cost of living increases, which are discretionary by the board. As Mr. Sullivan pointed out, there is an MOU in place that states the authority will follow county personnel policies and procedures. So whatever the county policy is for giving longevity increases would apply in this situation. I don't deal with, and I'm not an expert on county personnel policy, so I'm not going to give my opinion on whether that's mandatory or not. I simply don't know. But you may wish to ask either county council or county personnel department for an opinion on that.
We could defer to county council. I'm comfortable with that, county personnel and county council. I'm just not comfortable going with no policies that are reflecting the county's policies.
So what you're saying, Mr. Sullivan, is the department's heads cease to get, they don't have longevity raises?
No, what I'm saying is the department heads as well as elected officials have taken a 13% reduction in pay over the last 3 years, and that has not happened at the Solid Waste Authority. That's been a county policy. That's what I'm saying. So we're cherry picking which policies that the counties, which policies within the county we're going to mirror at Solid Waste. We need to mirror them all. If it is in fact going to be a county policy, if we're going to, if that's the policy of the Solid Waste Authority, it needs to be the same, identical across the board.
Okay, I understand.
So we may need to work on that to make sure they are the same or that they're not going to be the same.
Yeah.
So that's gonna have to come up in futures meetings.
One possible problem with that is if we're talking about negotiating MOUs, those are not automatically mirrored. The authority employees that have a union have a separate MOU, although I think it's substantially the same. They do have their own bargaining unit. So
I actually thought I read in the JPA document itself that, in fact, the employees of the JPA are not employees of either the county or the city. It specifically says that.
that's correct. They are employees of the authority. But a lot of the personnel portion of the business is run through the county. So to make everything mirror makes it that much easier for the county to affect the policies.
Well, there was a 15-year increase I see here in 2008, and the 20-year increase is now. Is there a motion to approve item 2.2?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Is there a second to that motion to approve the step? I'll second that motion.
Okay. Just for discussion, I'd like to recognize that Mr. Hendrick has put in 20 years, and some of those, especially the earlier years, were very difficult ones. He's probably at the peak of his career at this point, and we are able to take advantage of his expertise over time. He did receive at 15 years he received a longevity increase, so there's some past practice that is evident to me as we go forward. So unless we want to treat Mr. Hendrick differently than others, I'd make that motion.
And just as a matter of discussion, go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Goodman.
I don't think anybody in this room is questioning the qualities of Kevin Hendrick. Certainly not me. I think he's extremely qualified. We are sitting in arguably one of the most dour economies I can remember. We have to be conscious and guardians of the public trust. I appreciate all the efforts the director has done in my short time of observing it is extremely professional. I just can't sit here and approve a 5% increase when I know other people have made sacrifices of my cohorts, including when I first got on this board, I was given the option of taking a furlough, the 4%. And of course, there was no question in my mind I was going to do it. I wasn't going to come on the board and not contribute what every other employee who work within us do. So this is not a question, Commissioner Hawley, of Mr. Hendrick's qualities. They're at the zenith level. I just think this is not the time to discuss a 5% raise. Thank you.
Did you want to add?
Yeah, I just have one more question. Is this amount budgeted for in the current 12-13 budget?
Yes. Yes, it's in. It's budgeted. My only point is, I've been a 30-year public employee, and when I was hired, longevity steps were in there. I don't consider that a pay raise because it's not negotiated 20 years later. It's something that you started with and knew about. And so if you earned it by getting satisfactory performance evaluations, you earned it. And that's the difference between, no matter what economy it is. If you're negotiating for a pay raise, that's one thing. But if it's been in your contract for 20 years, that is something you earned by doing good work. There's a big difference in that. And the public sometimes doesn't understand that because there's not a lot of public employees here that can talk to that point. And so that's the reason I'm going by a contract. 30 years of being a public employee, longevity steps were part of contracts.
Chair Nia, did you happen to see the contract?
I have not seen the contract, but
I don't think we've seen the contract.
but if we're mirroring the county, I'm assuming that it's there. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm assuming that it's there. I know in the city, we don't even put longevity steps on the consent agenda because that's part of the contract that the person has. It's not considered a new pay raise. It's been planned in there, and hopefully they'll stay 10, 15, and 20 years. That's why they do that. So I'll call for the vote now, Mr. Ward.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
No.
Commissioner Sullivan?
No.
Chair Ania?
Yes, so the motion fails because we need at least one vote from the county. So we'll go on to, that's the end of the consent agenda. We will go on to the director's reports, item 3.1, 2, 3, and 4. Mr. Hendrick, please.
There's 4 items that are essentially financial reports. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I don't have, does anybody on the board have any questions on the financial reports?
No question.
There's no action required on this.
Okay, so those are approved. Let's go to the claims, 3.2. Did you have any comments on that, Mr. Hendricks? On the claim, on the claims? Or you did the whole...
Oh, no, I was referring to all 4 of the
all 4 of them.
items.
Is there any question? I'm
There's
sorry.
no action on any of those
Are
required.
there any questions on the director's report?
No.
Okay, seeing none, that will go on to, item number 4 is the landfill post-closure, and 4.1.
There is no action required on this, but Ted has a short presentation for you. Since some of you are new, this is new information for you.
And this is regarding the Regional Water Quality Control Board and regarding the underwater investigations at the Crescent City landfill. Mr. Ward.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Ania. So what we're talking about here at this point is the Crescent City landfill under the, has been determined by the Regional Water Quality Control Board to have a 1A threat complexity rating, meaning it has the maximum threat and the maximum complexity of any landfill, any closed landfill in the state of California. We are appealing that ruling because while this threat complexity rating has been in place for several decades, when the state budget crisis started hitting and the state started cutting back on the monies that they were forwarding then to the Regional Water Quality Control Boards, the Regional Water Quality Control Boards then made up their budget by essentially assessing fees for these waste discharge requirements and higher fees for higher threat and complexity ratings. And so consequently, with a 1A threat complexity rating, we are appealing this because if we could simply go to a 2B threat complexity rating, that would be a savings of nearly $30,000 annually. And so in July of last year, the director and myself went down to Santa Rosa and met with the director of the Regional Water Quality Control Board and staff to talk about ways that we might be able to address this circumstance. And mostly what they're interested in is they would like us to definitively demonstrate that there is close to zero likelihood that the landfill is having an adverse impact on the nearby residential water wells. So this map here indicates the residential water wells with these blue stars. And this little magenta square is where we're proposing to have additional piezometers. Piezometers are essentially hollow tubes in the ground that allow you to determine the height of the groundwater. And groundwater, just like water above surface, flows downhill. And so if you can demonstrate that essentially there is a slope, that this water, the groundwater that you first encounter here is higher in elevation than the surrounding points, then you can show that the water is flowing away from that point and therefore away from the residential houses. So that's essentially what we're proposing to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And you can see this is a map we submit as part of our regular semi-annual report. This indicates the direction of groundwater flow. These are the shallow wells, and you can think of that as kind of an underground topographical map. So it's flowing from the left of your screen to the right, generally, and that's going downhill. But you can see up in this area here where we're proposing to have a piezometer, we really don't have any additional information, so we can't really say what's happening with the water in that area. Here are the deep groundwater contours. You can see that they're much the same. So that's what we're proposing to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. We have been allowed to, in September 2012, the authority board directed that we could use the additional funds that would have been paid for that permit fee to do these additional investigations. So we're in negotiations with the Regional Water Quality Control Board. This is the status report. No additional action is required at this time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Yes, Mr. Goodman?
I do, Ted. As I've heard you say, we are at 1A, and then I heard 2B. Is that a mistake, because I'm seeing 2A here?
2A is what
Okay.
I meant to say.
Now, that's my next question. Is there a hierarchy to this? Is there a 3-level? Is there a 4-level? Or is it just 2 levels?
No, there is a 3-level. I believe it's A, B, and C, and 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, so there is such a thing as a 2B.
There is.
And we are currently at 1A.
That's correct.
And we are looking to save almost $30,000 when we move to 2A.
That's correct.
Is it realistic to presume we can climb up this or climb down this hierarchy to have lower levels? Or is it we're pretty much at where this 2A level? Is that where it's going to be?
To my knowledge, I don't know of another landfill that has successfully appealed this and changed their rating. So I think a 2A would be a good result, but theoretically they could drop us further, but I have not heard any conversation at any time from a Regional Water Quality Control Board person expressing that as a real possibility.
Well, I like anytime someone says they're going to save money, that gets my attention in a positive way. So having heard that, what will be the cost with these, are you saying the word piezometers? Is that it? What will be the cost to attain this savings? How much will it cost us to get to the savings of $29,896?
Well, let me clarify first of all that they've already approved for this year the reduction. We already have that. So for this 1 year...
This is for next year, I understand.
For this 1 year, they have reduced it already. Go ahead.
So the short answer is we're not exactly sure, because this is what we're proposing, to have piezometers in this location, but we have not heard back from the Regional Water Quality Control Board staff. They could come back and say, no, you got to do full water wells. Full water wells are more expensive to develop, and probably more importantly, we would have to test them on an ongoing basis. So the cost-benefit balance is a little bit hard to predict until we hear something back from the Regional Water Quality Control Board.
And do we have any kind of timetable on when that will happen?
Not definitively, no, but shortly. We're in communication. She said she would be back to me last week. Hasn't happened yet.
Well, I just want to make sure you know that I want to save this $30,000. I just would like to know how much is it going to cost. It's not going to cost us $29,000 to do this, is it? I mean, is there a reasonable estimate we can understand what it'll cost to save this $30,000? Could you address that?
Until I hear from the regional board exactly what they would consider satisfactory, it's hard for me to just throw a number out there, because I don't want to disappoint you and say, well, I heard that it was going to be cheaper. Why? I don't know.
We can report back on this as we find out more. I can see that you're interested, and it is a very important issue.
Indeed. Thank you.
Any other comment from the board? No. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none? Okay, thank you very much, Ted. Item 4.2 is the discussion and possible action regarding the ratification of a contract with EBA Engineering to provide engineering services at the Crescent City landfill related to non-water corrective action, cost estimates, and gas investigations to comply with Assembly Bill 32.
Ted will provide a detailed presentation on this, but I want to just give you an overview and pointing out that this was one of the contracts that was approved at the last meeting, and out of an abundance of caution, it's put on for your ratification today. Ted's already started interacting with the contractor to get them working on part of this. There are two different state mandates that we're trying to complete with one contractor, so I wanted to make that clear on the onset, that there are two different things but one contractor.
Okay. Good.
So the two main things that are happening with this contract is a 5-year review application for the Crescent City landfill. This is something that's being required by by Cal Recycle and through our local enforcement agent, Brian McNally, who's in the audience tonight. But essentially, it requires that we develop a cost estimate for addressing non-water releases. There's a variety of different methods of doing that, but that is part of what needs to be done with this contract. The other thing that needs to be done is a landfill gas investigation, and there are two phases of this. The first phase is to try to definitively determine how much garbage is in place at the Crescent City landfill. If it's less than 450,000 tons, then we fall into a different regulatory tier, and much of the additional investigation would not be needed. So that is our first question, is can we definitively say whether, and defensively, that we're below 450,000 tons in place. That is challenging in that prior to 1995, there was no scale at the Crescent City landfill. And prior to the first placement of garbage, there was no recorded survey. So we don't really know the base topography with any clarity, and for many years we don't know the exact tonnage that went in. With those uncertainties, we're still pretty close. The initial estimates that we had indicated that we had about 483,000 tons in place. So it's close. They're doing that investigation. But because that would significantly reduce our regulatory burden, we thought it was worth pursuing that investigation. So that's step one. If we are in fact above 450,000 tons, then we have to report to the Air Quality Management District the landfill gas heat input capacity, which is essentially determining how much fuel value there is in the landfill gas, and therefore how much regulatory control is needed on that. So that is the second phase of the project, and we are asking that you ratify this agreement because these are requirements from regulatory agencies, and if we choose not to answer those agencies as they've requested, then I would request further direction as to how we would respond to those agencies.
Okay. Any comments? No. Yes, Mr. Kidd?
I guess I'm the question man today, so I'll continue to ask it. It's $22,715, correct, Ted? That's the contract.
Yes.
It's divided 10,000 in landfills and 22,000 in gas investigations.
They're both related to the landfill.
Sorry?
They're both related to the landfill.
Yeah, I think it's prudent to move forward on this. It has to be done. We have to do our homework, so I can support this.
So that's a motion.
Yes, I'll make that motion. I didn't know if anyone wanted to
Thank you.
chime in.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and second. Is there any public comment on this item 4.2? Seeing none, please pull the vote.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Item 4.3 is next, and that's a discussion and possible action regarding the status of assessment and repairs of the winter storm damage at the county landfill.
This is also Ted. He'll give you a brief overview of what's happened with the winter storms this year.
Okay.
This is an update, follow-up. This damage occurred essentially between October and mid-November of this winter. Mm-hmm. And following the damage that we saw, we went out there with Eric and Jim from the county engineering department to discuss what might be done. And the county engineer, Jim Barnes, suggested that we go out there after the ground is totally saturated, when you really start seeing a downpour, because that's the time when things really start moving and most of the erosion damage actually occurs. So we really wanted to get a better idea of where the water was flowing and how and at what rates, so they could design additional drainage structures. Since that time, we really haven't had that concurrence of events. So we've sort of been ready to go out there and see it, but we haven't seen anything further. So this is a zoom in. If you look at this map and you see this, this yellow box here, and then rotated on its side, that's what you get. So this brown area here is the perimeter access road. These pink areas are areas that have experienced significant erosion. And you see some pictures there that are blown up in the following slides. So this is looking west from the base of the landfill on the east side. is looking south down to that same area. And then now on your upper right, we'll see the other damaged areas, and that's looking west. So we do have significant damage. We are seeing the drainage mat. This is the first time the damage has damaged both surface and subsurface structures. And for that reason, we really did want to engage the county engineering department, because it is the county's landfill, and possibly additional drainage structures will need to be added. So we plan on doing those repairs this summer.
Okay. Any
So that's a
questions?
status report. No additional action is required unless the board chooses to give additional direction to staff.
Okay. Any, Mr. Gitlin, do you have any comments?
Again, I'm going to presume, Ted, if nothing is done, it will just worsen.
Absolutely true.
Okay, well, this is clear to me. I'd like to make the motion, unless someone else has something to say in the interim, to make these repairs forthwith. $10,000 is my understanding.
Sorry. There is no vote required on this. The direction was given prior. The rough estimate provided by the county engineer is just that. When we get out there with them and start pricing out the products, then the cost will be more clear. It should be understood that a large portion of the cost will be payments to the county engineering department and the county roads department. So this will be money out of our budget going into the county's budget to help complete these repairs.
So you'll come back to us with the cost?
We will report back to you as often as you want on this as we make progress. Sure.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the board? Any public comment on this? Okay, seeing none, we will thank you, Mr. Ward. We'll go to item number 5, which is the collections franchise. And this is regarding possible action regarding a letter from Recology of Del Norte requesting the annual CPI adjustment of the collection rates as provided for in the collection franchise. Mr. Hendrick?
This item is also related to item 6.2. We have two contracts. This one is the contract with Recology for garbage and recycling collection. Built into that contract is a mathematical formula to provide for a CPI increase. Under the contract, it requires that they submit a letter requesting that. I'm hoping every year they don't, but you know,
They remember.
they remember every year. So they've both submitted on time in the requirements of the contract. The next step for us would be to find the appropriate CPI number to use. We tend to wait as long as we can to get the most current number. Then staff calculates the proposed change, sends it to Recology and their staff for review. We prepare a change order to the contract which effectuates the change in their contract, and then there's a rate resolution that we'll be bringing back in May or June for the board to consider adopting this rate adjustment for Recology. And similarly, both this and the Hambro rate structure will happen on the same time frame. After the rate resolution is adopted, the new rate becomes effective July 1st, 2013. I think it's worth pointing out that rather than negotiating every change of cost, if fuel prices go up or insurance prices go up, this is a very manageable method of having fair and relatively small increases over a period of a contract. It's a mathematical formula. There's very little negotiation involved.
When will you have that again?
We will be back with the change order on the contract and the rate resolution probably in May or June,
May or June, to be effective in July?
to be effective July 1st.
Okay. And you have the Hambro letter too, because we only have the Recology one here.
The Hambro letter is 6.2, is 6.2.
Oh,
I'm sorry to
6.2.
blend them together, but
That's
it's
right.
essentially the same story I could tell you
right.
at once.
Okay. All right. Is there any discussion?
Well, just for clarification, this is something that is within this franchise agreement, and our failure to do anything different than what we're proposing to do would be in violation of that agreement, I imagine, wouldn't it?
Well, I'm not an attorney, but it is a condition of the agreement and might be considered a breach.
Okay,
But
thank
this
you.
is more for FYI that's coming up.
Yeah, there's no action required today. They've met their timeline as required under the contract, and we'll be back for the action in a couple months.
Any further discussion? Any public comment on item 5.1? Okay, we'll move on to 6.1, which is the discussion and possible action regarding the potential to provide certified weight services at the transfer station to assist local residents and businesses to comply with the requirements of the California Department of Motor Vehicles.
Let me point out at the onset that this is a discretionary act. It's your call on this. Chair Ania asked to have this put on the last month's agenda and then, didn't come. But we put it back on for more discussion this month. And Ted has a brief overview on this so you can have a little more information and then we'll answer questions.
And a lot of my staff report essentially is asking and answering questions. But the bottom line is that staff are not recommending that we pursue this at this time because there is currently a private business that provides this service. And so as long as there's a private business providing the service, we'd be happy to make sure that they continue to have that business. So as there is currently a single operational commercial truck scale in Del Norte County, staff recommend that the authority board request that Hambro/WSG inform authority staff if and when they decide to stop providing public scale services at some future date, so there's adequate time for establishing another scale to provide these services in Del Norte County.
And that was my question, is I had understood that Hambro was going to cease to do that, and so several people approached me about that work and they get officially waived. But apparently Hambro is going to keep that open for a while?
That's my understanding. When I have communicated with Wes White, he said they might change their mind in future, but at this point in time, they're planning on continuing it.
How long would it take Solid Waste Authority to actively have a scale if Hambro closed theirs tomorrow?
About 6 months.
The steps would be multiple. There would be the permits and application. The scale we have works, so we don't have to buy a scale, just to be clear. That's the advantage of considering this, is we already have the scale, we have the system set up. It would be a variation from our core business, but it is, I think, theoretically and logistically possible to do this. The complication would be establishing what our costs are and then proposing a rate. Because it would be a new rate at the transfer station, it would require a rate ordinance. And generally, once you say go, then there's at least 2 meetings to have the rate ordinance, and plus this would be a test of our new system where any ordinance needs to be also ratified by the city and the county. So that would, I predict, might add another month, but it's a new system, it's a new process, so that's why Ted is on the outset saying it could be 6 months. It might be shorter if this was not controversial.
Well, thanks for checking with that. That's good, and I agree. If another business has it, we don't need to do that. It was my understanding they weren't going to do that. So that's good to know, and hopefully they'll give us a few months' notice so that we can decide whether we want to do this or not.
Well, and I also think we need to know the numbers of what we're going to, what the cost would be. Is this going to be an outgoing cost, or is this something that's going to actually make the authority whole, or are we?
I considered it has some extra income because we charge for them to weigh on the scale, and we already have the attendant there.
Yeah,
So,
there is a charge for the service. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Go ahead.
There is a charge right now at Hambro for the service. Whether our charge could be the same as that depends on what kind of costs we have to put into it. There are some permitting costs and probably not more labor costs, but we would not. Of course, it's your discretion to set the rates, but I would recommend we don't do it in a way that we lose money. I think it's not the kind of volume where we're going to make a lot of money either, or you'd have more private companies, I think, stepping up and doing this. I think when Hambro was doing it, it was part of their operation when they had the full operation going, and it was just another thing that they're doing. And just to be clear, I think that what makes it tenuous for them at this point is they don't have all of the other things going on over there, and at some point it just doesn't make sense for them. I don't know if Ted mentioned, I don't recall if Ted mentioned in his staff report that he reached out to Tidewater, another place that has a scale, and I only heard his half of the conversation, but I could tell it was not going well. As far as how many cars, and I'm supposed to tell my boss how much money I'm going to make on this, So it's, ideally, it would be best for a private company to do this, but it might be the kind of thing that you decide is appropriate for a public agency to cover, because otherwise, the other option is people have to drive to Humboldt County to get certified weights, and I think people would find that challenging.
Well, and that's exactly my concern. I'm concerned that Hambro may not give us or may not be able to give us a time certain, and if we have 6 months, and in your it's estimated that there could be 10 vehicles a week that we would do. It said maybe fewer, but let's say there's 10 vehicles a week. 6 months would mean that 250 people are needing to drive to Humboldt to get their vehicles weighed. And I think that doesn't seem, since we're in the business of recycling and clean energy and all things green, having these cars unnecessarily go back and forth to Humboldt doesn't sound like a good idea.
Yeah, and like I said at the beginning, this is a discretionary action on your part, and we'll follow the direction that you provide for us. Depending on what you want to do, we're just providing the information to you and making, and you know, I think very wisely, Chairney has suggested that you consider this. So we'll obviously we'll follow any direction that you want to provide on this on whatever time scale that you suggest.
Thank you, Mr. Ward, for doing that work. Hopefully, we won't need to do it. Or bring it back.
Did you have anything specific in mind?
Well, I just was wondering what the cost would be to begin the applications and the training, so that when Hambro does pull out, we're able to hit the ground running. I don't know. Maybe there's just not enough information here right now.
Well, do we know for sure Hambros is going to pull out on this?
No.
No. Okay.
I think it's likely, but
That
not
was
definite.
an impression.
Is there a way we can maybe get an update at the next meeting as to where everything stands on
Absolutely.
the Hambros side of
Absolutely.
stuff? So-
How about if we pull together some more details on what it would take for us to do this, and that would be at least moving us forward in the sense of preparing for your direction if you provide any.
Okay.
Bring the permit documents, figure out what the costs
a little
are.
broader than that, too. I was hoping that Wes would be able to give us an update on where Hambro's situation.
Sure,
There's
sure.
a lot of rumors and myths floating around, and I think the more he can put those to bed, the better.
Well, Joe Wallen is here, and he's the guy that we see most often at the transfer station.
Welcome.
Yeah, I'm Joe Wallen, the manager of the transfer station. To give you a little update on Hambro, first of all, I would say that you got to remember that we're dealing with 7 different legal entities. And Hambro WSG is a legal entity aside from those other 7 companies. The scale issue is something that has to do with Hambro Forest Products and nothing to do with Hambro WSG. So when you're asking about, you know, financial wherewithal of a company, then we really have to be specific. We want to talk about the scales and whether the scales will operate. I can tell you that, in fact, in Ted's report, he refers to Hambro WSG and actually mentioned it today. The scale has nothing to do with the company Hambro WSG. And I guess, you know, having Wes come down and talk about it, I think what you're going to find is he's going to want to keep these things separate and talk about each company separately. And the scale matter has to do with Hambro Forest Products and its ability to continue. So I just wanted to throw that out.
So Hambro's forest product is continuing right now.
Right now, it is continuing, yes.
Okay.
So it's not the Hambro WSG we're talking about on the scales then?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's something on the report that's off a little bit on that.
Correct.
Thank you for that.
Chair Nia?
Yes, Mr. Gideon?
I've done a little due diligence on this. I think it's prudent that this board look to cover itself in the eventuality of anything happening, whether Forest Products has a scale and it's available to us or not. It's a private scale. It may or may not be. Hopefully it will be. My understanding of this certification process, we have working scales and they're fine. We need to have them certified. This is a fairly streamlined process. I don't know it would take 6 months. I was told differently. Once the equipment is there, I think it's in the best interest of this board to certify a second scale at the transfer station and instruct the authority to get its scale certified. I think that just makes good sense.
To clarify, both scales are certified by Weights and Measures annually. However, what is not happening is the waymasters are not certified, and we have not gone through the annual application fee that would be necessary so that we would provide certified public weights. But the scales themselves are certified.
Okay, so this is actually, it kind of bolsters my argument that there's even less to certify, is what I'm understanding. You is what do you call them, waymasters?
Waymasters.
What would it cost to do that?
Well, the permit fee is $175, but there are additional expenses producing the documents. We would have to work out the process. There's additional questions to be answered without a doubt, and I don't have all those answers.
No, I do see that, Andrew. You have the fee there. But
I
this
do.
this is not budgeted, is that correct?
Because we do not have a rate for these services, it's nowhere in the budget, either as an expense or an income.
To be clear, I don't think that's going to hang you up from us doing this, because if we were going to proceed with this, we would have a budget revision that would have a revenue and an expense, and assuming that gets approved, then it's in the budget.
So, Mr. Gidlin, your suggestion, if I have it right, is to go ahead and have it ready, but not use it because it's already being used in the town?
Well, we have one that's just being used, that's correct. I'm not hearing the cost to certify the waymasters is going to be an inexorable cost. So I'm kind of asking this board, shouldn't we cover our bases and have a second certified scale ready to go and not wait for something that may or may not happen? And I appreciate the fact that Hambro has some financial difficulties which may be cleared up by the time we have our next meeting. I don't know. But I don't think I want to wait to be surprised. So if the cost is reasonable, and I'm hearing that it's a certified scale that's at the transfer station, we only need to apply for a certain permit on the waymasters. To me, this makes sense for this board to direct the authority to go ahead and get its permit in to make our scale, a second scale, whether it's used or not, certified, certainly for balance of year 2013.
Mr. Ward, does that annual application start at when we receive the permit, or is it based on a fiscal year or calendar year? Is it for a solid year that if we apply and get that?
I don't know immediately. I would have to look that up.
Just to be clear, we haven't received any direction from the board to spend either time, staff time, or budget on this. And honestly, it may seem like a small number, but we're not currently able to tell you exactly what those numbers are. And with a small budget like ours, $1,000 is a big number for us to try to cover on a safety sort of factor.
I didn't hear $1,000. I heard 175. Now, I just would like to know what we do know, and if it's reasonable and prudent to move forward on certifying a second scale. $175 doesn't seem too extravagant.
Again, both the scales are certified. Both
The
scales.
waymasters is
The
what
waymasters, and there's a permit process, and there's record-keeping requirements. A lot of the expenses are not necessarily hard cash expenses for permitting agencies, but they're setting up processes so that we have the waymaster forms and and we have the documentation in place, and that we've worked out all the details so that we can provide these services as required.
Well, and let me be clear, I'm not being resistant to your direction in any way. If you provide direction today that you want us to proceed to further assess what this would take, that's one option, and come back with more details. If you're giving us direction that you want to move down this path, we're happy to do that. I don't think it's going to be an excessive burden on us to get all that information together for you so you can...
Yeah, I have to say I kind of agree with Mr. Gitlin, and I am concerned about a 6-month lag time if that's what it ends up being. But I don't know that we have enough information to actually vote today. Maybe you could, I hate to take a lot of time on this month after month, but if you could bring back some actual numbers about what it might look like.
We'll do whatever you ask. I mean, if you want to give direction to go ahead and do this, that's what we'll do. If you want us to compile a more complete packet so you can see all the details of what it takes and be poised for your direction next month, we'll do that. Whatever it's your call.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
Councilman,
I'm in agreement on that.
It's just very important for this community. It may seem small stuff to the JPA, but
Well,
Well, no, I
also-
mean,
yeah.
we were aware of this before Chair Ania brought it up, and, but we work for you. You know, you set our priorities, and if there's something you want us to do, then we will start moving down that path. And, because it's just, it's a slight diversion from our normal course of business, but it's not an impossible thing for us to do as a...
Well, and I think it makes sense, as long as the private sector is willing to do this, and there is another business or existing business doing it, then we should let it up to the private sector, but if we don't have any other alternatives, then we do need that other plan, basically.
Well, and we may be able to get you the point of having a rate structure in place and not provide the service until you tip the dominoes on that. So we can get you pretty far along this path.
I think we're unanimous in that, to do that.
Okay, we'll come back with more details next month, and
Okay? Any public comment on
thank you
this
for your
item?
feedback.
Seeing none, we'll move on. And we did 6.2, or do you want to go back to 6.2?
Well, you know, it's, as I said, similar contract language in both contracts, and Hamro got their letter in. We'll run it through on the same parallel process to Recology.
Okay, we'll go on to general solid waste authority matters. Item number 7.1 is discussion and possible action regarding the election of officers, vice chair, secretary for the Del Norte Waste Management Authority Board of Commissioners. I enjoyed my one meeting. Who's next?
Yeah, Rich, you already stepped up. Of course, he was absent when he got elected, so...
I'll move to nominate Supervisor Gitlin as vice chair of the Solid Waste Management Authority.
I'll second that. It's been moved and then seconded. Any comments?
Thank you very much.
Mr. Ward, would you please take the vote on that?
Sure. Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Chair Ania?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Do we need a secretary for the board?
Yes, we do. The secretary doesn't have to take notes, but there are some documents that need to be signed, rate ordinances, for example.
I'll nominate
Contracts.
Commissioner Hawley.
Well, I'd nominate the public member, but
Sadly, the public member cannot be an officer. So
In that case, I'll second that motion.
we're narrowing it down.
Good try. Would you please call the vote, Mr. Ward?
Okay, that was...
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
And Commissioner Hawley?
oh, yes.
Thank you. Item 7.2 is discussion and possible action regarding the process to appoint a public member and alternate to the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority Board of Commissioners. Mr. Hendrick?
Okay, so I'm not sure how you want to do this time. I provided you some information on how we have done it in the past. A public member has served for a 4-year term once they're appointed. So we've only really run this process 3 or 4 times since I've been here. But the process that we have followed, and I think there are laws requiring that we provide a public notice. And I forgot to ask Martha, but I think it's, 10 days in advance of the application deadline? Yeah, I'm putting her on the spot. There's enough time to get this out with, I think, 2 weeks' notice before the deadline for submittal. There is, I attached a sample of a public notice if you have any comments on that, and a sample of application that we used last time around, which also could be modified at your direction. But it's basically get some names in the door, and then again, under the first amended JPA, there is a slightly different process that we go through than we've ever gone through before, so it's a little hard to predict the process, but if you give me direction today, I'll get this ad. I think I'll have time to get it in the paper by Saturday this week. Probably run it 2 Saturdays in a row to give adequate notice. Be surprised if the radio station didn't pick it up. And then get the applications in, bring them to you at your next meeting, but then you need to think about what kind of process you want to have for interviews or selection. And then once you all agree, at least 3 of you, then that person that you're recommending needs to go to the city and the county for approval also, so that'll add a couple extra meetings.
Have we had an alternate in the past?
We never have. We got close to having an amendment to the JPA that provided for an alternate, and it is, I'd have to say, I think it's still an option for you. There was a discussion previously about, and I think the last time it came up was Jack Reese was the public member, and he swore that he was never going to miss a meeting and there would not be a need for an alternate, which I think generally was mostly true. So that also is a new thing. Good, thank you for pointing that out, because we've never had an alternate to the public member, but again, I think that is, am I correct, Mark?
Is there any member comments?
Kevin, is there a stipend associated with the public member only?
Well, all of these board members used to get $375 a month. All that gets packaged together for the public member now. No, Roger, I'm just kidding.
I know the stipend wars.
Nobody gets paid nothing.
No.
That was
Zero.
in the first amended JPA, the one y'all adopted last year, and Mike helped us be very meticulous in removing all reference to payments or possibility of payments now or in the future. So everybody's volunteer.
Well, the reason I bring this up, and Commissioner Hawley and I have come across a similar situation at LAFCO, that when someone donates their time and effort, and we want someone who is professional, we want the best, and this is going to go before each of our boards or councils, I think I'd like to include a modest stipend for those who attend on a once-a-month basis. Now, this is not, let me clarify, please. This is not for us. This is for the public at large member, just like we did on LAFCO, and I think that someone should be recognized. So, having said that, I'll see if anyone has a different opinion of mine.
Oh, I have a different opinion. I think that's a big can of worms, and it is a volunteer position, and we want people with an interest of being on the board, specifically for being on the board. So I would strongly disagree with you.
I disagree also. It's a volunteer position. I mean, our task force probably puts in a lot more time, and they're not paid for it. And I don't think that would be fair to do. We meet once a month for a couple, 2 or 3 hours, and maybe an hour of looking over your stuff. I think a volunteer would work well.
I think, let's be candid, it was kind of a hot button on this panel before, and I don't think we need to raise that hot button again, so I would not be in favor of it.
Well, clearly, we're going to follow whatever direction the majority of you agree on.
Yeah. What about,
I hear the crickets in the back.
what about, how's the board feel about an alternate? We've never had an alternate. Should we advertise for a board member and an alternate? It's a 4-year term.
It gets approved every year, though. It has to be reapproved every year per the way the new amendment is.
Yes.
So I don't think that'd be an issue. If somebody's missing multiple meetings, then, yeah.
Is that okay?
So.
Is that okay just to advertise then for a member? A volunteer
Yes.
member?
Okay, so that's direction to run the advertisement and try to get the results together for your next meeting, for your consideration.
Okay.
And any other thoughts on how you want to do that? Because I'm the one that they'll submit applications to. People may have questions on what do they have to do, and in the past, I think we've just had people show up and you can...
Well, you have applications, Kevin.
I have an application. The application is in your
And
agenda.
it's in there, and
It's just a short-
there have been some people who've called me, and I hope you don't mind, I've referred them to you for the application.
Yeah, and we can-
The deadline is April 15th, is what I'm understanding this.
Well, again, you can tell me when you think the deadline should be, but that's what I'm suggesting.
2 weeks, 2 weeks in the paper.
Yeah.
Do you want us to talk about the selection process, the interview process?
I just want you all to be clear, and it would be helpful for me to be clear on how you want to do it. All I can describe is how it's happened in the past is you bring whoever is interested and they're in a public meeting and you get to...
Oh, you do it in a public meeting, you don't do it, okay.
You can't.
Yeah.
I've never been on the board, so.
Yeah, well, that's just why I'm bringing it up, so you're all aware that's how we've done it in the past. They all come, you have the paper in front of, you can ask them to do a short presentation, or you can just ask them questions, however you want to do it. I don't think the process is defined other than a legal requirement to provide adequate notice to anybody who might be interested.
You're okay with doing it at one of our meetings? Are you okay with that?
Well, my only question was whether or not we want to come up with, I don't want to complicate this too much, but with some criteria. I mean, I've had constituency approach me and say, look, you really shouldn't have any people that held off public office before. What we really want is a community member that that is absolutely objective going in, for example.
Well, you have that discretion when you see who applies. And then it's the
That's-
cumulative judgment of this board. If you think that
Okay,
that's...
I mean, that would be pretty extensive to go through that kind of skill assessment, probably, so, never mind.
Well, I would like to say one thing on, Commissioner Holly, you had experience, you were appointed to a position first, then ran for office. I think that process, and I believe it did go into closed session, did it not? It was a process where there were 6 applicants, of which I was one, and you eventually prevailed, but it was a closed session matter, and it went into,
No, it was
share
not.
with me the process on how the city council filled its vacant position as a model for what we might do here.
It was all done in open session.
Yes.
We did our interviews, they took their vote at the dais, and I sat that evening.
No cloak and dagger?
No, it was all public.
Oh,
No.
yeah, I remember reading the article, the interview process, so it is out in the open.
Yep.
And that's what happened last time when the public member was put on this board.
Okay.
Well, because once they get appointed, it's all public after that, so you might as well get them used to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except in this case, we can have a recommendation, but it has to go back to our boards to be ratified.
You make the recommendation, and then it's a new process, so
Right.
presumably then I'll somehow forward that to the city and the county for ratification. But like I said, it's a new, improved procedure.
Any other comments? Any public comment on this? Yes. Give your name, please.
Is the microphone on?
Mike?
Give your name for us, please.
I'm not loud enough.
There you go.
When you serve on the board, and especially like the task force or anything else, that's your duty as a citizen to get involved. And I wouldn't ever want to see anybody getting paid to do what they should be doing.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Larson. Any other public comment? Well, then I think we're in agreement about advertising for it, and then we'll put it on, I don't know, for next month if we probably could get it for next month.
Sure. Yeah, this is not like an ordinance. This can move more quickly.
Okay,
So
that's fine.
I'll move it as quick as I can so you can have another partner up there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll move on to, actually, 7.3 is closed session, but before we go to that, we're going to go to item number 8, which is the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Authority, in case there's anybody out there for that. This is 8.1, discussion and possible action regarding ratification of a 5-year contract with North Coast Auto Center for abandoned vehicle abatement towing services.
Excuse me for interrupting,
Sure.
Chair Ania. You need to adjourn as the Solid Waste
that's
Management
true.
Authority and convene as the...
We will do that. We'll
The other.
adjourn temporarily for a few minutes as the Solid Waste Authority, and we'll open as the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Authority. Could you please take roll? Thank you.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Here.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Here.
And Commissioner Holly?
Here.
Okay, so we're discussing North Coast Auto Center. Mr. Hendrick?
Yeah, again, this contract was approved at the February meeting, but again, out of cautious advice from our attorney, we're asking that you ratify this agreement so that everybody's cool.
And it's my understanding there was only one person applying that met the qualifications?
There was only one qualified response. True.
Yeah, North Crest, what did I say? Oh, North Crest Auto, I'm sorry, I said North Coast.
Yeah,
Is there
North
any
Crest
comments?
No, I think that's...
So our recommendation is to ratify this agreement, and then we can move on.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any public comment on the ratification of North Crest Auto Center for abandoned vehicles? Yes.
Mike?
Why would we make a 5-year contract and not a 2-year contract? Something we don't know, is a 5-year contract standard?
Actually, I think last time it went on forever.
it was longer.
I think this is 5 years been shortened.
Well, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. We made contracts before that were.
We shortened it because the tow companies that were here several months ago said they have to buy certain equipment, and they wanted it to be worth their while to buy that equipment to remove some of the
Okay.
abandoned vehicles.
So instead of 2, you made it 5 because they're making.
It was like
that's-
7, and we reduced it to 5, or was it
It was
9?
long, I thought it was like 10-year contract.
we
so
reduced it to 5.
reduced it to-
Yeah, I had 15 years.
Well, there's also a termination clause if for some reason you're not satisfied, or as it's sitting as the AVA board, if you're not satisfied, or Dave Mason or the city council, city police department is not satisfied with the service, you can,
We have a 30-day escape clause, right?
you have the discretion to make a change.
Yep. And that's the reason, probably only for one bid, because it's a specialized thing for that. Is there any other public comment?
Well, and I should add, I think it's worth adding that Northcrest Towing has had this contract before, and there were some bugs to work out, but generally they are a very capable company. They should be able to provide the service without complaints.
Okay. We'll see no other public comment. Mr. Ward, would you poll the vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Chair Ania?
Yes. Thank you. Then we'll adjourn as the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Authority, and we'll reopen as the Solid Waste Authority, and we will be going into closed session. So you can stick around if you'd like. We'll come out and report, or else thank you for attending in our meeting.